People in the modern world feel increasingly personally powerless. We live in a world we don't seem to directly have an effect on. The world seems to spin out of control. It's not really clear who is in charge. And a superhero comes along and we know who is in charge. So those sorts of needs to reassert personal power in a world that overshadows us.
What are you? I'm Batman.
I think it's no accident that the best superhero stories take place in an urban setting. There's something about the kind of rigid, grid-like, almost prison block feeling of a modern city that responds very well to having an athletic figure freely jumping across it, you know, completely oblivious to gravity, completely oblivious to walls and everything. So yes, I mean it does work wonderfully. I remember the first time I went to New York, I was thrilled to look out across sort of lower Manhattan and see all the water towers, the cylindrical water towers on the roofs of buildings, just like Steve Ditko had drawn them in Spider-Man. Because, you know, I thought, wow, you know, this is so colourful and it's real.
I used New York for the background for most of the stories because almost any type of background you wanted, you could find in New York City. It made for very interesting background material. Also, I lived in New York, so it was very easy for me to be authentic. I could mention what neighborhood something was taking place in, and I knew this was true because I knew the neighborhoods.
What Stan did was, and Stan's and all Stan's compatriots, is that they looked outside their windows and they all lived in New York. And what better scenery do you need than this? You know, if you're going to have Spider-Man swinging off of buildings, well, you got plenty in New York.
If you, in your mind, transform building into the natural environment, it would be canyons and valleys. So the feeling of being closed in at the street level, but if you could rise above it, there's open space. And the superheroes fly above the confines of the city out into the open sky.
If you don't do Spider-Man in a position where nobody else can be, where you're looking down at the canyons below with all the buildings coming up at you, then you're not using Spider-Man right. If you make him standing on the ground, you've wasted Spider-Man. So he must be either clinging to a wall or above the city looking down in perspective. So you make the best use of the character. Whenever I do Spider-Man, I try to keep him off his feet as much as possible. I hang him upside down, I cling him to a wall, I have him swinging upside down. It's one of the tricks.
Cities like New York are supposed to be representative of our greatest achievements of humanity up to this point. So therefore, that's where most things are going to be going at. So that's a state of a city, is to supply a place for that superhero to be at his best effect. Whereas if you take Batman and put him in where I came from, Lubbock, Texas, there's not much for him to do down there. You know, he's going to roll around looking for hillbillies to beat up. So there's not much of a point to taking characters like these urban heroes and removing them from the more developed urban society that we've come to. Superheroes seem out of place when you take them out into the middle of the countryside.
America is thought of as being the great experiment. And there is a connection between that and superheroes, a very strong connection. If I'm in America, I can become anything. Representative, I can become a president, I can become anything. That's very optimistic, very heroic, and very idealistic and very stupid. All in one, all in one. So to have those ideals, I could believe in great things, utopias, and it wouldn't matter if it happened. I could still believe in it. I could still have that potential, you know, that they made this great experiment and it worked. Look how well it worked.
I think that people like superheroes in the best possible sense of what, you know, talk about America, the democracy and the level of, you know, truth, justice, and not so much maybe the American way, but freedom of expression, you know, stop totalitarianism and about decency and good, you know, and that good will triumph. And I think that as kids, we need that. We don't understand as children gray at all. And which is kind of odd, because if you think of a whole country that really doesn't like dealing with grays, and really wants to prefer dealing in black and white, that almost sounds very much like a country full of children, unfortunately.
I guess that is a reflection of what the American society would hope to be like, but I would like to think it's also a reflection of what any society would want, whether it's European or Asian or African. I think all people are basically good. All people would like to see the hero win over the villain. And that's why these movies and these comic books are enjoyed all over the world, not just in America.
Who is the most popular comic strip character in the newspapers today?
I give up.
It's Superman.
You mean our guest tonight is Superman?
No, not Superman. Our guest tonight is the man who originated Superman. He has written all of Superman's exploits since this idol of millions made his first public appearance. He's Mr. Jerry Siegel. Good evening, Mr. Siegel.
Good evening.
So you are the man behind Superman, Mr. Siegel.
No, I'm just one of the men. I write the situations and the dialogue. And the strip is drawn by my collaborator, Joe Shuster.
How old are you?
25.
And how long have you and Mr. Shuster been working on your high-voltage Robin Hood?
We started about 8 years ago, but Superman has been in print only the past 2 years.
Well, what caused the delay?
It took us 6 years to sell Superman. He was turned down by almost every comic editor in the country.
The American public first encountered its most famous superhero in June of 1938. On the cover of #1 of Action Comics, Superman appears lifting a car with his bare hands. That was a landmark.
I remember the first story, the first Superman story that came out. The first cover of his lifting the car, which was startling. I mean, who could lift? Gee, if I could lift the car, you know. And then reading the inside and understanding or feeling at that time that this was possible. Superman, even as it was drawn originally in this raw form, was one that I recognized and that I felt was alive. That was what was so exciting. A character like this seemed like it could exist. I would guess that that's probably the one superhero character that really had a tremendous effect on me, that I felt some kinship with.
There were comic book heroes before that, but they were cops and detectives and pirates and cowboys and that sort of thing. Superman was the first superhero who had powers far beyond those of mortal men, as the introduction to the TV series used to say.